Okay, hello everyone. I'm here today with Marissa Herrera, and she's a choreographer, dancer, former director, producer of the TV show 2 Feet In. She's been the assistant director and script supervisor for the short film Me, Myself, and Them, um, among other accomplishments. So, Marissa, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Hi, it's an honor to be here with you today and to be able to share a little bit about my story. I am a third generation Mexican American Chicana, born and raised in Azusa, California. So I'm an LA native, which I think is really important to my story, and especially the stories that I tell creatively. Um, I have been a leader in arts education for now almost 25 years. And I've been performing. I did my first live performance when I was 3. I did a little solo performance to La Negra in the talent show at this school that my mom worked at, and I haven't left the stage since.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Is that kind of how you started with the just knowing that you wanted to be a part of the industry? Was just that first talent show and just kind of click?
Yeah, I think, I always get asked, when did you start dancing? And according to my mom, it was out in the womb. I was always moving around. And I don't know a time of my life where the arts hasn't been a part of it. But definitely, I know it sounds weird if you think of, like a 3-year-old, but like at 3, I knew that I was a performer. I think as I've gotten older, obviously that's taken a lot of different forms. But I knew that I was an artist, and I knew that, this was the life path that, I was kind of destined for.
I think that's so special because a lot of people tackle with knowing what they want to do with their lives. So to be able to know from such a young age, I think is amazing. Um, so what inspired you when you were younger, and sort of what inspires you today? Is it the same? Is it different?
Yeah, definitely, I think art and culture have always been a really important part of my life and part of my creative inspiration. When I was little, I used to help my neighbors. She used to have like yard sales all the time. And I used to help her, and my payment was that I got to keep her National Geographic magazines. And I love that because being a little, Mexican girl in Azusa, um, there were so many people that were growing up in this community that never experienced anything outside of it. And so with those magazines, like I got to this was before cell phones, before the internet, all of these things. I got to really look into the cultures and lives of these other communities and these other people through this magazine. So like anthropology and culture, rituals, all of those things have always played a really big role in my life and have been an inspiration. My mom actually is a really big inspiration. She worked in education, my entire life, and arts was something that was really important for her to bring, to young people. So she would perform in the talent shows with me. She was, my first choreographer, and she really helped nurture, the young artist in me. My family was really supportive. I think, you know, it was one of those things. It's like, okay, but how do you make money, doing this? Because we didn't know anybody who really had a career, in the arts. And our families, don't want us to struggle. They want us to be able to go into something, graduate from college, have a livelihood.
Right.
So that was something that, definitely took some balancing. It still does, especially to this day. We're living in a global pandemic, and, the arts have been shut down in so many ways. But definitely that. And really, I think being able to build, even at a really young age, it was important for me to build communities of people to be able to share, to share their stories and to be a mentor. I've had, growing up, we didn't have, my mom was a single parent. We didn't have money for like all of these expensive classes and all these different things, but I had incredible teachers and mentors that really nurtured that in me and gave me the opportunity. And the promise was that I would pay that forward and be able to provide that same space for young people, which I also do today.
Was there anything that a teacher said that kind of stuck out to you that you kept on to since until today?
I don't know if it was one particular moment of something that, I think stuck out to me. I think it was that I kept being provided the opportunities to grow and learn and really dive deep into my leadership, even at, a really young age. And that's when I started to see the pathway, I think, for myself. And if anything, I think like the overarching message, from all of those mentors was like, keep going, and there was never a doubt that being an artist was something that I couldn't do. So I think that just them, it hasn't been easy, I'll say that, but them just, believing in me and giving me, that space to be creative was the guiding path.
This next question is a little bit more of a fun question because I'm also an LA native, but what would you say is your favorite part of LA?
Oh, God, there's so much. I'm a beach girl. Like, I love the sun and the water. It's my happy place. So definitely the ocean. There's something that just makes everything make sense, when I'm there. But I would also say downtown LA. I think it's where I still live in Azusa, but in downtown, I think it really has become a nucleus for so many artists, especially, a lot of small theater companies. There's a lot of small music venues there. And so it's also kind of been my artistic home, like for the last decade. So it's kind of a catch-22 because there's a lot of gentrification that's also, happening. So we're fighting to keep it ours. But there's something about the energy in downtown that, I really love.
So would you say it's like LA as a setting has been one of your biggest inspirations as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very proud. I always say I'm a SGV 626 girl for life because I do live out in the San Gabriel Valley. But being an LA native is in my DNA. And I think it's deeply reflective in, a lot of my creative work. Like you mentioned, the pilot 2 Feet In, and it's set in, LA, and it's a character. The freeways are a character,
right?
In our story. And I think there's a difference between telling a story about LA being a native and somebody else just, plopping down a story, whether it be, on a stage or, on a film or on TV that we see. But yeah, like I've been able to travel the world, luckily, and been to a lot of different places, but LA will always be home.
Switching kind of gears now, you have a production company called De Mi Alma. How did you get started? What made you want to start a production company?
Yeah, so De Mi Alma Productions came out of just being at a place in my career where, as a Latina, we know that our stories are not represented, authentically. And every year, the research is done. And even though we're the fastest growing population in the United States, we still don't see the stories that reflect our everyday life. And when we do, they're stereotypes, right?
Exactly.
And so for me, it was just like, okay, I'm tired of complaining because we're all saying the same things. And if I want to see the change, then, I have to be the change that I want to see. And so I started, the production company, and it's small, but our mission is to share the American Latino story for stage TV and film. I'm a third generation, Latina. And so my story isn't one of like, drugs and gangs. Like we didn't have, an immigration story. I've been here for 3 generations. So for me, I'm like, why don't I see the stories of, a now, early 40 something, Latina who doesn't have to be a stereotype. Like I'm a professional woman and I have a family and a story, and I'm an American at the same time. So for me, that was the catalyst, was like, let me show them what it looks like, because the people that are writing our stories don't look like us, and they're guessing and they're getting it wrong. So, I've learned a lot. I didn't go to school. Ava DuVernay was quoted in an interview that she did. And she said she didn't pick up a camera until she was in her 30s because nobody ever gave her permission to and told her that she could. And it was the same thing for me. When I was younger, even though I knew that I was a storyteller and I wanted this was going to be my life, it was never really in my mind like, oh, let me go to film school. I didn't know anybody who'd ever gone to film school. So there's a lot that I'm learning in the process of, creating a TV show and, producing other work. But I think what I bring to the table in my creativity and my leadership and my skill set as an artist and a storyteller, that is something that can't be taught.
I think 2 things that I want to point out. Asking permission, I think the Latinx culture we're so used to having to ask permission. So in order to find that kind of drive within us, I think it's so important that there are people like you who are like, no, you have to make these kind of happen for yourself. You can't just wait around and ask permission for things to happen. And then second thing, a lot in this class, actually, we've been talking about how we're tired of seeing Latinx stories, or just stories about minorities in general, where their entire storyline is just them being a minority. Like, we want to see Latinx stories of love, of careers, of like a sci-fi movie with a Latinx character, like just regular everyday stories of everyday people, I think is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, part of what 2 Feet In is, which is the TV pilot that, I created that's loosely based on my life. But when I was doing it, everyone's just like, oh, is it in Spanish? And I'm like, well, there's Spanglish because that's what we talk. But no, they're like, oh, well, are you pitching to Telemundo or Univision? And I'm like, no. I'm like, it's an American family that happens to be Latino,
Exactly.
And I think that's part of the narrative that needs to be switched, is that I'm not creating stories that is just for a Latinx audience. And I will say it, non-POC people don't think, oh, we have to create it just for, for white people. We all watch those shows. And if anything, like really good storytelling and really good TV and film is about the human experience, the things that connect us. And I think that is a direction, that we need to, to move in, and that somebody's identity should not drive the story of a lead character, if they're BIPOC. You don't see a white, lead male character, and everything that we see be like, oh, it's because he's white.
Exactly.
And so I think we have to just, continue breaking the paradigms and, moving the needle in this uphill battle. And we have to be the ones sharing our stories.
I completely agree. Where would you like to see this production company go in the future?
I would like to see us continue to, create authentic TV shows, and film, and, again, work for stage. For me, I think part of the work with the production company and my vision is to, we say like, to be the Latina Oprah. Like, I want to greenlight other people's projects. I want to be the person that is in a position to be able to bring the next generation of writers and directors and producers on board, to give them the opportunity. And I think part of the issue in the industry today is that when we do get into the room or to the table, they're just like, okay, well, let me see your resume and let me see what you've done. Well, for a lot of us, that might not be a huge list, because again, nobody's giving us the opportunity to be able to, direct something, on a network TV show, or have direct a blockbuster film. So it's just like, oh, well, you don't have the experience. For me, I think a lot of what I've been hearing, lately is like, oh, the industry needs to take risks on the Latinx, community. And to me, that's like glass half empty talk. I want to reframe the narrative that the industry needs to invest in our stories and give us the opportunity, and provide us with the right resources, the appropriate budgets, because you can get a green light, for a project, but they're just like, oh yeah, well, we're going to give you this much money, because if it fails, then we didn't lose that much. But other projects are getting, when they fail, they're like, oh, they failed because they need more money, so let's give them more money. And I always say that BIPOC people are given one chance.
Exactly.
We get one chance. And not only do we have to meet that, we're supposed to exceed, the opportunity, but, non-BIPOC people get many chances to fail.
Yeah. Not only that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say not only that, but a lot of the time that one Latinx, or just in general, minority producer, director, actor, whatever it is, they end up having to represent the entire community. So it's literally like one chance for the entire community with this one person. And it's a lot of pressure to put on these people.
And to try and share everybody's story. And I think that's where we fail ourselves as well, is that we do feel like we have to represent everybody. We got to tell every story, like in this one thing. And then, a lot of the times the vision and the storytelling gets watered down, and we shoot ourselves, in the foot. But I'm hoping that, some of what we've all always known, is that what has come out of this election is we cannot be lumped into like one group.
Exactly.
An experience of a Latinx person living on the East Coast is different than somebody living on the West Coast. They're different stories. There's different audiences. And, I'm hoping those are the points that are start to continue to, come to the forefront as we move forward.
Sort of speaking about all this diversity and representation, I truly think it's so important that young kids today are able to see that representation and know that they can do the same thing, that they can see themselves in the people they see on screen, on stage, whatever it may be. So I know that you have a 4C lab that's like artistic education for young people. How did that get started? What made you want to start it?
Yeah, so 4C Lab is a 501c3. We're an arts nonprofit, and our mission is to create a safe space for young creative visionaries to share their stories through artistic expression. And it's for young creative visionaries ages 15 to 23, multidisciplinary, to workshop, with professionals in the industry. We do a lot of self-reflection and affirmation through the arts. And the 4 C's are to create, to communicate, to collaborate, to build community. So that's like the nucleus of the work, that we do. And I mean, I've always been a teacher and a mentor. I worked in the charter school system for, 10 years and then moved into the nonprofit sector. And for me, the arts is a lifeline for so many of us. Even if you don't go into, it as a professional career, it's a means for us to be able to process, to be able to express ourselves in ways that a lot of times we don't have the vocabulary to be able to do, especially in underserved communities, where kids are constantly living, in trauma and can't afford, expensive classes or, to be part of this conservatory. And so I know the positive effect that the arts had on my life, as a kid. And I wanted to be able to create those opportunities, for other young people, and it not come down to, well, I can't do this because my family, can't afford to be able to pay for it. So I feel like, especially the opportunities that are coming up, for minorities in the creative economy, things look different now. And it is their life skills, but they're also careers, being able to be a creative strategist, being able to use just different art forms to give insight to any career is really, really valuable, and important. And that's definitely, part of my life's mission as well.
I think that's so important. I definitely looked up to the arts when I was younger, and I mean, I still do for a lot of inspiration. So to be able to give that to kids who don't necessarily have the resources to go pay for a bunch of classes, I think it's awesome. So the future of our world lies in the hands of these people, of youth. So what are you most excited for in terms of where the future can go with, obviously, youth being the leaders for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our future is very bright, with this next generation of creatives and, visionaries, especially when it comes to areas of unity and, bringing us together and building community, especially in the work of social justice. We've seen that, especially during 2020, and the value of using the arts, as a mechanism, for healing. And part of it is like with the work with the kids that I do, in 4C Lab, it's just like, I don't want them just to be like problem solvers. I want them to be able to create solutions.
Mm.
And I think that's definitely the direction, that hopefully we're going in, within our society. We are definitely at a crossroads, in so many different things. I think 2020 has cracked open, each of us in so many different ways. But there's a quote by Rumi that says, the wound is where the light comes in. And I truly believe that. And I think that's what's happening on individual and a collective level, right now. So I believe full-heartedly in, the next generation of leaders, and that they, are really going to make a positive impact as we move forward.
Kind of going off of this talk we've been doing about social justice and diversity and representation, when was the first time you saw yourself represented in the industry?
I would say, there was a movie called Fame, that later got turned into, a TV show. And Irene Cara, who was an actress, singer, songwriter, dancer, played the character of Coco. And growing up, I wanted to be Coco. And the character was actually also kind of, Irene in real life, that, she was a performance artist that did so many different things. She was Afro-Latina. So, she had dark, coarse hair. She had the same skin color as me. She had a big, vibrant personality, and she loved to perform. And that was probably the first time I saw somebody that I was just like, oh my God, like that, that could be me. And at that point, I don't know, I was probably 7 or 8, maybe 9. And to that point, I hadn't seen anybody, really that looked like me. And then after that, there wasn't anybody for a really long time. And I think the next pivotal moment that I can recall is for the very first time watching Luis Valdez's Zoot Suit in my sophomore Spanish 1 class, and seeing Rose Portillo, play Della at that time. Because at that point, anyone that I had seen that did look like me, they were either, the barefoot and pregnant gang, person, didn't speak English, just nobody that really reflected, my life experience.
I think it's so unfortunate that when we do see representation, it's usually once every few years, and a lot of people are like, this is it, this is going to be what starts it. For example, I know a lot of people thought within the Heights, it was just going to be this mass influx of representation, but we're still over here waiting. So it's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing where, people are like, oh, there is progress, and and I think there is, but we can't all just hang our hats that Lin-Manuel Miranda, writes a credible musical every year, so that we can see ourselves as an opportunity, for many other stories, to be shared.
And then to kind of add on to that, I mean, I love Lin-Manuel Miranda, but people assume he's like the be-all, end-all Latinx that can sort of write for any culture, when in reality, that's just not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
What kind of discrimination have you experienced in the industry, whether that be stereotypes, etc.?
Whew. Yeah, I would say it is something that I've had to experience. It's come in many different forms. In the early part of my career, I don't even know if I fully recognized it, because it was just so normalized. There were things, there was sexism, there's racism, there's, speaking of stereotypes, just different things that, as, a Latina, where it's just like, oh, you have to give, this sexy vibe, or, the fiery Latina, type of thing going on, which also becomes very, problematic, with other women, or whatever the expectation is from, the director. So that was, really hard. I think I'm trying to think if there's, anything in particular of that had to do with racism. I mean, probably a lot of colorism too.
Yeah.
I'm dark, I'm an indigenous woman, so that would definitely come into play. And also, just as Latinas, like, we're shaped differently. So being a dancer, I look different in, some costume pieces that other dancers do. So that was always probably a really big fight, as well, is, with costuming, like making sure that I felt comfortable in, what I was wearing, or, what I was in. And then again, when it comes to casting, a lot of the people that are casting the roles, even if it does call, for a Latina woman or whatever, the casting person may not be Latina. So now I have to act like the character that they think I should be. And there's been many a times when I, you do a take and then they're like, cool, can you do it with an accent? And I'm like, what kind of accent? This is how I talk. I'm a Latina woman. Like, this is how I talk. And vice versa. I've auditioned for Spanish network stuff and I've been told that I'm too American. So it's just that, that really weird space. And that's why I was just like, okay, I'm not doing this way anymore. I'm going to create work that reflects like who we are so that we're not trying to fit into, anyone else's, box.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the podcast I was listening to, and someone mentioned like it's so confusing because you're taught that you have to assimilate, but then the jobs that they want you to do, you have to sort of unassimilate yourself and kind of go with what they think a typical Latin person looks like, dresses like, sounds like, etc.
Well, yeah, and interestingly enough, there was a scene that I directed for the National Hispanic Media Coalition's Latino Showcase. So, there was a Latina writer. I was brought in to direct, and the scene was a mother and daughter. And our first rehearsal, just doing a read through, and the actress that was playing the mom was speaking, English, but like with an accent. And I, paused her and I was like, why does she have an accent? And she just kind of pulled back and she's like, I don't know. And she was just like, every audition I go to that calls for me to be a mom, they usually ask me, to do. So it was kind of an aha moment for her. And, for me, where I was just like, I don't think she has an accent, And so we got to build the backstories of these characters because we got to be able to pull from our life. Now, had I been a male director, or a white, female or male director, they probably could have wanted her to have that. But that's why it's so important for me in the work, that I create to not just have, representation in front of the camera, but also behind it. Exactly. Because that's where we also, the numbers don't add up for us.
Exactly. Most of these stereotypes didn't come from a Latinx crew or director or producer. It came from white America assuming things about us.
Absolutely.
Based on your knowledge and experience of the industry, specifically regarding Latinx sort of artistic mediums, has the industry grown for the better, for the worst, and sort of where do you see it going in the future?
I mean, the general answer is we have made progress. We have moved the needle. There's some really great work that is being, created. I think we have a whole generation of people who are having the opportunity, to be on that pipeline, and are hopefully having people open doors, or extend a hand, which, a lot of us didn't necessarily have that when we were, your age. Is it enough? No. And I do think that's part of the problem, is that because we have, the Lin-Manuel Miranda, because Selena, was trending #1 in US and Mexico, they're like, oh, okay, that's enough, you got it. Or those are the only people that we're gonna, go to because they've created hits and they just keep getting, all the work. So I think, there's still a lot that needs to be addressed. Part of that comes with having representation all the way up at the top. We're still not the decision makers. We're still not studio heads or, heads of different departments besides, diversity and inclusion, which that looks different everywhere we go. Exactly. But to me, like, I think the bar is going to be that we don't have to say like, oh, that one Latinx show, or yeah, did you, we went from this percentage to this percentage. It's just normalized that I don't have to be that Latina, director, producer, choreographer. It's just like, oh, like that's Marissa, and like this is the work that she does. So we're clearly, not there yet. But again, I do think that, we have made some progress. And that there's a lot of opportunities now with technology that you don't have to wait for permission, for somebody to say, yes, it's okay for you to, create a project. With 2 Feet In, like I created, executive produced, and funded the money, and we shot it ourselves because I wasn't going to wait on like some network to give me the opportunity, to do it. And for me, people will embrace something that's tangible rather than an idea. Mm-hmm. So everyone's like, well, why aren't you just shopping the script? I'm like, because the people that are going to read this don't know what my story and my lived experience is, because it's not theirs. Like, we have to show them. And I'm glad that I did it that way, so that I could be like, no, like this is it. This is the product, and and this is the story. So I'm hopeful that we continue to be able to share our stories, and to support them, so that we're not knocking on Hollywood's doors. They need to start knocking on ours.
Exactly. What kind of stories do you think we need the most of right now, especially going on with everything that's happened in 2020?
I don't know if it's like a certain genre, of stories that need to be told. I think it's just as long as they're authentic, because I think there's an expectation that Latinx people need to tell Latinx stories. Like, no, like a Latinx director needs to be hired to do the next sci-fi whatever of aliens living in space. Do you know what I mean? Or to produce or write, a superhero story. It shouldn't be that we're just put into this box and it's like, oh, you guys just need to be able to tell, these specific stories. No, we should be able to write, create, and direct things that reflect lots of different life experiences. So I think that needs to be, be the narrative.
With that being said, what do you think is the biggest lesson you learned this year?
Woo! Wow. There's been a lot. I think now, coming upon the end of the year, there's a lot of gratitude that I'm in. As hard as this year has been, because it has been so hard on so many different levels, but that I got to pause and breathe and really assess the things that are valuable to me and that matter, and to let go of the stuff that doesn't. And especially working in this industry, especially with the standards, and the expectations, I think that are put on us, especially as women of color, is really hard. So I think one of the biggest lessons would be to really take in the things that matter and let everything else go. And also that time is not promised. And I think there's a lot of things, we talk ourselves out of a lot of things, especially when it comes to investing in ourselves and our lives and our dreams. And this year has shown me that you just got to jump in. And if you want to accomplish something and you have something to say and something that is going to make a positive impact on other people's lives, you just have to do it.
Exactly. I think if anything, this year has taught that there's no time like the present. Like,
Yeah.
I know a lot of us sort of yearn for that normalcy. So I think if anything, it's taught to live in the moment and value what you have, because you never know when it can all go away.
Yep. Exactly.
This is kind of a fun one, but
Okay.
what song, movie, play, dance number, what of any of those describes you?
Ooh. Let me think. There's two songs that I think that I actually meditate to, that are kind of like mantras, for me. One is called "I Was Created for This," by the R&B artist Tweet. And when I start to get discouraged, or get imposter syndrome, or get in my head about things, I put that on, and it's a reminder of what my life's purpose is, in this lifetime, and that I was created for this. I was created to exist in this moment of time with the gifts that I've been given, to make a difference and make a positive impact in people's lives, through art. And then the other one is called "I Am Light" by India RV. And it's also, gives me the opportunity to remember what I am, and that I am light, I am love, I am a connector, and what I'm not, that I am not, the traumas that I've experienced in my life, as a Latina woman, or the history of our families and the oppression that, we've generations have experienced before us, that still deeply, affect us. And a fun song, I think, would be a hip hop song called "Poison" by the group BBD, which every time I hear that song, it makes me want to dance no matter where I'm at. So that's something that is kind of uplifting, high energy. When people hear it, I think it reminds them of me.
Awesome. Is there anything that you would tell your younger self?
Wow. I would tell little Marissa that she is enough, and that it's all going to work out.
I think that's really important to hear, especially when you're little. So,
Yeah.
to finish this off, where can we find you? What project do you have next?
Yes, thank you so much. You can find me on Instagram at Marissa Creates. That's probably the best way. Same thing on Twitter. You can go to our website for 4C Lab, which is www.4clab.org. I'm updating my website. That was one of the things that I'm doing over the next couple of weeks, which will be marissaherrera.com. And all my creative work in my life. So you can find me there. And then for what's next, we are still working on getting To Feed In, the series, picked up. But you can see the pilot episode on KidsFlix, which is an app that you can download on your phone, and you can watch the episode for free.
Oh, so exciting. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and good luck in everything. I'm really excited to see what your next steps are.
Thank you. You as well.
All right. Thank you, Julianna.
Bye.
Bye.